Good morning or afternoon. I'm really pleased to be here today for the first webinar in our QualiWare webinar series for 2026. My name is Brenda Cowie. I'm very proud to be the SVP for the Americas at QualiWare, and I've been in the EA space for quite some time, about 20 plus years now, starting out with a boutique EA consulting firm back in the day. And I've worked with a few EA software vendors in our space you might have heard of. I brought BizDesign over into the North American market way back when in 2009 or so, built the business for 12 years. Then I did the same for Value Blue, another Dutch vendor, opened the North American market for them. And more recently, I was working with Orbis, raising the brand profile and securing some top accounts. And now here I am in the seat running the Americas for QualiWare. And in these roles, I've sold and managed some pretty large enterprise accounts like JPM Chase, Intel, Desjardins, Meta, and others, and created some large enterprise deals, dealing with largest customers, preventing churn, creating strategic partnerships in the space with SIs and other consulting firms, as well as having the pleasure of doing some analyst relation work with Gartner, Forrester, Infotech, and the like. All this to say is I've had the great privilege and opportunity to peek under the hood of many organizations and see how they do or sometimes don't work. So in today's webinar, we're going to really just take a look at what people are focused on these days and challenged with on the front lines. So today I thought we'd talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the marketplace right now in recent months in terms of trends and strategies and popular use cases, and what we see ahead for 2026. As enterprise architecture continues to evolve, we're seeing organizations really struggle to balance innovation with operational efficiency. So today we're going to look at some of the latest EA trends and insights from the market, from the analysts, and from the customer base, shaping how leading organizations are tackling things like technical debt, streamlining portfolios, and driving measurable business value. But first, indulge me a little bit about us, a little bit about QualiWare, the vendor. We're a long-established firm in the space. We have been around for 31 years now, and we're rated consistently as a leader and visionary by Gartner, Forrester, Infotech, Spark DTO, etc. We've got approximately 100 employees with 850 customers across the globe, and quite a loyal community. The average customer term at QualiWare is 15 years. So we've got a global reach through our own regional offices. Our headquarters is in Copenhagen in Denmark. We have offices in North America in New York and Toronto. We also have locations in Johannesburg, South Africa, London in the UK, Stockholm, Sweden, and of course, a robust partner channel to fill in the gaps. As expected, our platform brings with it all the standards and ratings to ensure we provide business integrity rather to our customers. And the platform itself, we're not going to do a demo here. The rest of the webinar, I promise you, is going to be info and insights. But the platform itself, it just acts as a central repository connecting disparate data in one place that allows you to do things like connect the dots of your organization, from business capabilities to value streams to applications to the infrastructure that supports it to business process models. You can leverage it to support things like what we affectionately call EA 101 work, like road mapping and gap analysis. You can go to risk and compliance. You can leverage it for APM and AppRash initiatives, vendor management, mergers and acquisitions, tech debt. The list goes on. It really depends on what door we walk in terms of the business problem we're looking to solve. But although I've been around for a while, I want you to know that we actually have a very modern, outcome-driven approach to enterprise architecture. We're quite well known in the space as a vendor of innovation. And in fact, Gartner thinks our digital twin and AI capabilities are worthy of calling out. And Forrester recently called us out in a market research article, as being very innovative with our new QualiWare Go app. So most importantly, though, we are rated very highly by our customers, and that is what we truly value as a vendor. Okay, last slide about us, I promise, just a little market evidence of our experience and leadership in the space. So, rated consistently by Gartner, Infotech, the QKS group is the Spark Matrix, and the Forrester Wave is coming out soon. So enough of the vendor stuff. Let's get into it. Let's take a quick look at the re-emergence, as we see, of EA in the space. Forrester states that enterprise architecture has long had a mixed reputation among business and IT leaders. They've often seen it as slow and disconnected from reality, but that perception is changing. Charlie Betts and his Forrester colleagues just published this article in January 7th of 2026 about that perception, about the market, about how important it has become. EA's really shifted from a marginalized sort of nice to have optional thing to a very strategic function that drives alignment and agility. Forrester data confirms this growth, and the market signals really are unmistakable. Major vendors have entered the EA tool market. There's a lot of private equity backing, and the market itself has exceeded $1 billion in annual revenue for the first time. Infotech has recently created a framework for a successful enterprise architecture playbook. And in their last couple of conferences, enterprise architecture has been in the top 5 priority lists for CIOs. Gartner has also recently published an article about 8 steps to starting a high impact EA practice, highlighting the importance of it as well in the market. They also have a focus of talking about tackling tech debt and portfolio management, and how can we leverage EA to have impactful AI initiatives in an organization. So today's enterprise architecture landscape, it just kind of leads us into what we're seeing in the market right now. And the areas of focus that we see people spending their time, their money, and focusing their activities on. Speaking with industry analysts and CIOs and CEOs, and I love to talk to CFOs because I want to tie it back to that financial impact. There seems to be some repeat themes and areas of focus. It's enterprise architecture for a number of years was about documenting things, or boxes and lines and arrows and pretty pictures that weren't really usable, or being, those folks who were creating those pictures weren't really being held accountable for a lot of things sometimes. And now it's really about surfacing connected data insights, right? And influencing those business decisions that really empower CIOs and stakeholders to make faster decisions, to make better business decisions that hold more integrity based on current continuously updated data. 93% of CIOs say that their organizations can't make fast informed decisions due to poor visibility, due to fragmented systems, and a lack of real-time updated trustworthy data. The EA market growth is really accelerating as organizations are recognizing its value to support transformation and AI efforts. Companies are increasingly investing in architectural capabilities to manage this complexity, but the focus really needs to be on enabling the business decision-making culture. A business decision-making culture that doesn't rely on bias or politics in the room, but that connects good quality, updated data in a continuous manner to better support these decisions with integrity. In short, effective EA today really helps businesses make informed decisions about technology, about costs, about risks, resources, and priorities. And it's not about those boxes and lines and arrows and the pictures. The focus really has to be these days on business impact. So we've got to make these insights more accessible and decision-making more collaborative, because after all, we believe that this really is a team sport. So there's a couple of interesting stats on this slide that I think are worth noting, but I really like that McKinsey stat. I think it's quite compelling. What would it mean to your organization to be 30% faster at getting new capabilities to market? That could be something you could, support as a business case and point to a tangible ROI and monetize. So we're living in a time where every organization wants to become digital, right? But most are building the future on top of what we call yesterday's decisions, right? So we see some common use cases in the space, and there's some outlined here on this slide. Tech debt management. application portfolio rationalization, compliance and risk integration, AI adoption, and what do we do with AI, and governance, and really focusing on what we're calling value-based architecture. So we're seeing this emergence of use cases that really have clear business benefits and that, if not attended to, have clear implications or pretty painful consequences on the business. And everyone's undergoing this digital transformation of some sort, right? It means different things to different people depending on what door you're walking into. But it usually involves assessment of current processes, of your resources, of your environments. And typically, for example, an APM initiative is on the agenda, and for good reason. It's one of the most popular use cases in the enterprise architecture space, that's for sure. But organizations who undertake application portfolio management initiatives, for example, can see a cost savings of anywhere from 15 to 40% of their application costs. There was one client I worked with at one point, and they had 13,000 applications, and they used a piece of software like QualiWare to manage that, to attack that, to simplify their environment. And they went from 13,000 applications, of course, this took some time, to about 11,000 and then 900. They landed at around 720 or 750, but they managed to save about $23 million a year on their application costs. So that's a pretty significant, fantastic result for the business, right? And the name of the game these days is really just enabling those better business decisions, right? Having current connected data that the stakeholders can then use as the basis for those better decisions. We're also seeing more organizations choose an enterprise architecture platform to support those efforts instead of working in the way they have before, which typically is siloed data in Excel, Visio, PowerPoints, whatever's in Fred or Ginger's head, that leaves whenever Fred or Ginger leaves the organization. So we're going to move on to the next one. There is what we call a technical debt crisis, right? This use case is very popular and prevalent pretty much everywhere we see, regardless of sector, regardless of client. This is something people need to tackle. There's some great stats on this slide, but tech debt really is the cost of prioritizing speed over long-term maintainability when building software, and it's really reached critical levels. This slide highlights some of the key stats around the impact of tech debt, right? 23% of the average IT budget is spent addressing technical debt. That's something you can monetize. What's your organization's budget? What's 23% of that budget? What does that number look like? How could you be better spending those dollars? Take a portion of that to address the tech debt, and then imagine what you could do with the remaining dollars, right? So that's something you could throw up as your use case. 42% of security vulnerabilities are found in outdated systems. So tech debt isn't only just a cost problem; it's really a security problem and a business risk. As organizations, prioritize speed to market, this tech debt accumulates over time. It creates hidden costs and these security exposures that grow more and more expensive to address, not to mention the reputational risk, right? So proactively managing tech debt is really critical to controlling costs and maintaining a secure and resilient IT infrastructure. So we've got a strategic approach framework to reducing your technical debt, and you can see that on the slide here. Outdated systems slow down innovation and increase your security exposures and inflate your operating costs. And when leaders say transformation takes too long or costs too much, it's often because tech debt's hiding in the blind spots. With an EA approach, you can quantify your tech debt. You can map the risks to the business capabilities and prioritize remediation based on real business impact. And this shifts the conversations from, well, we need to modernize someday, to, hey, here's the measurable cost, risk, and value of acting now. And reducing your tech debt, as I said before, frees up your budget, reduces operational risk, and accelerates every other strategic initiative from cloud to AI. So again, why tech debt is important, why addressing it is important. It minimizes your security vulnerabilities, it reduces your maintenance spend, it improves agility for future change, and eliminates barriers to innovation. So we highly recommend you pay attention to this. So let's take a look at AppRash. If you walk into any enterprise today, you're going to find something, well, surprising or maybe not so surprising, depending on your experience. But most teams don't actually know how many applications they run. I ask this question in any conference, in any webinar that we talk about this as a subject matter. I do a show of hands, and we do, 0 to 200 applications, 200 to 500 applications, and who just has no idea? It's amazing how many hands are in the audience for that. But they don't know how many applications they run. They don't know what they cost. They're not sure why they exist. And there's also usually questions about how dependent the business is on them, right? Just because it's an old application doesn't mean it might be a core or key application to your business. So it's really important to make that assessment. And then we wonder why things like cloud migration feels like pushing a boulder uphill, because cloud isn't transformation, clarity is. And when we understand what systems matter, what's redundant, what's ready for modernization, cloud becomes less of a gamble and more of a strategy. And we stop paying for the complexity that we never needed. And we start, hopefully, building on a foundation that's really intentional. So, things like cloud success, well, that starts with knowing what should move, not just what can move, right? So we've got a QualAware recommended portfolio rationalization framework, and you can see that here. It's a framework for tackling APM. Many folks employ the Gartner time model, also fully supported in the tooling. And software platforms in the EA space can produce dashboards that clarify that kind of information and give folks a place to visualize and start making some decisions. Many organizations we see target a 20 to 30% reduction in applications over a period of about 12 to 24 months. That's what we're seeing in the market. And there's some real results from portfolio optimization, which again is why it's so popular. It's a common lack of governance and application sprawl is a common challenge. Contributing factors like M&A is a core growth strategy, or kind of the wild, wild west and a lack of governance or poor vendor management can really add to those costs, but also, again, lead to very, additional risk in terms of risk and security for many organizations. And, you can achieve some great results. Like the story I relayed earlier, and you can see some Gartner statistics on these initiatives here on this slide as well, right? $42 million in annual savings, a portfolio reduction of 28%, 2x faster deployment after eliminating redundant systems. So, the other, as I mentioned before, this other key focus for a lot of organizations is this shift to cloud and modernization. And that's, bringing the importance of identifying the core applications and creating simplification really to the forefront. So shifting on to another popular use case we see these days, compliance, right? Compliance is a very popular area of focus these days, and for good reason. A recent example of an organization who didn't have their act quite together in this area is Citibank, and this information is quite public. Their CEO, Jane Fraser, has had to pay out some pretty hefty fines in recent years. Citibank has faced multiple compliance fines, including a $400 million penalty. I think that was in 2020. And then a more recent, in 2024, $136 million fine for failing to address some longstanding data quality, risk management, and internal control issues. In addition to that, they failed to catch a $1.4 billion trading error. So, I'm sure the house has been shaken up as a result. But the name of the game these days, for having a good compliance approach is really enabling these better decisions. You've got to have current, connected, relevant data to base these decisions on, to make sure your processes are in line. So we're seeing organizations choose a software platform like an enterprise architecture platform to support those efforts, rather than working with siloed data and missing important dates. We could also talk about the newest kid on the block in this arena, and that's DORA. So many organizations are starting to, get a grip on the new DORA Act, and it stands for the Digital Operations Resiliency Act. It came into effect, rather, in January of 2025, so it's about a year old, and it mandates stringent new technical requirements and rules for financial institutions and critical third-party ICT service providers. So while it really applies to organizations that are headquartered in the EU, it also extends to their satellite offices in North America or other parts of the world where they are also tied to the European head office. So not only that, this regulation stipulates that all of the vendors that do business with any of those organizations also must be DORA compliant. So, if you're in the compliance consulting game, this could be a real sweet spot for you. And so, of course, QualiWare recommends embedding your compliance into your architecture, and we're well known in the space for having a very strong compliance module. The cost of not knowing can be very expensive, right? Compliance used to be an annual event, but now it's really a continuous expectation. It's always on, and it is always scrutinized, and there's many things to keep track of. And so far better to do that in one centralized place than in disparate data sources. And here's the truth. Most compliance failures, they don't happen because people don't care. They happen because the organization didn't know, or they didn't have the right processes or systems in place to keep abreast of the dates and submission dates and readiness. So they didn't know which processes depended on which system, right? They didn't know which data was exposed. They don't know which controls are missing because it's not all in one centralized place. Having an EA approach, having an approach in a tool like QualiWare gives you traceability, right? It gives you that ability to connect the dots before something breaks, and compliance stops being a burden and becomes a shield. It becomes a way to protect your people, your customers, your data, and your reputation. So we want to be proactive on that. And who would we be if we didn't talk about AI, right? Managing AI adoption, AI governance. What is our AI framework? What are we going to do with AI? Let's talk about it. Every conference I've been to, Gartner, IT Expo, Infotech, the Chief Architect Network, everywhere, they're all talking about AI. If it's not the keynote, then it has its own separate track. But really the moral of the story here is the future belongs to the prepared. So right now, every CEO is asking, hey, what's our AI strategy? Where is it? What are we doing with it? But what we're hearing from our client base and prospects and the market at large is, is our data even ready for AI? Have we determined what the intent of our AI usage is going to be? And this is what we see people focusing on, really getting their data connected, and what do we need to feed it, right? So AI is not magic. It's really a mirror, and its quality is only going to reflect the quality and clarity of the data, your data, your processes, your architecture, and your business priorities. And, for what purposes are we leveraging AI and AI agents? What are we feeding the beast? So if your data is scattered and duplicated or poorly governed, AI is not going to save you. It's going to amplify your chaos. And EA gives us a map that reveals where our data lives, how it flows, and whether it can be trusted. Only when we understand our digital ecosystem can we really bring AI into it in a responsible, ethical manner and at scale. And I really think, I've got two questions at the bottom of the slide. Everyone's got to figure out, how is AI going to make us money? How is AI going to save us money? At the end of the day, those are really, your why questions, to go Simon Sinek on you. So, the other use case we're seeing is just, and this is not a new use case, certainly, but simplification, right? Simplifying your environments, simplifying your enterprises. It's a key focus area. And the Gartner stat here is really compelling, as complexity costs 10 to 15% of an organization's annual revenue through inefficiencies, redundancy, and lost productivity. So if you were to attempt to monetize that stat for your organization, we can look at TD Bank, for example. I did a quick look, and TD Bank's annual revenue for 2024 was approximately $88.2 billion, reflecting a 17% increase from the previous year. So if you're looking at an annual revenue stat of $88.2 billion, even at the low end, that's $8.8 billion in complexity costs. And so when you frame costs in this way, people start to see, the costs, the implications, and that will often help to spur dialogue or action and inspire some changes in the way of working. So take a look at your organization's annual revenue and do a quick calculation. So of course, we've got some cost and complexity reduction strategies here that QualiWare recommends based on our years and years of work in the space. We do recommend you standardize your tech stack, you consolidate your vendors, you automate operations, you optimize your cloud spend. I mean, even just talking about consolidating vendors, if you just look at vendor management, that is a really effective application of software like QualiWare. Having a way to in one place, track all of your vendor contracts and your due dates. And, do you have a 30-day warning? Do you have a 90-day warning, etc.? I know one organization I worked with, they were managing this stuff, their vendor management, with Excel and Visio and some PowerPoints, mostly Excel. And I was speaking with them originally, I think it was in October of that year, and they had already overspent by $2.3 million because they just didn't track their contract dates well enough because they were doing it old school. So, employing some of these measures can really, and simplifying that environment and having that leeway to renegotiate your contract or renegotiate your rates. But when they weren't tracking it and not keeping on top of it, they just kind of fell victim to the annual renewal without, any way to fight it because it just automatically renewed. If we're looking at measuring business value and impact, leading enterprise architecture teams are now connecting their architecture decisions directly to their business outcomes through value stream mapping and outcome-based metrics. How is your value measured? Is it measured by revenue? Are you measuring your business value by risk reduction, by working more efficiently, by cost savings, by being more agile and being able to pivot when the market changes? And especially in this day and age, we know that there's changes every day in the news that we need to be made aware of. So having that agility is really key for a lot of organizations. And, there on this slide here, we're going to talk a little bit about real world value realization. There's a couple of examples here. And I think they're pretty compelling. That Infotech quote on the bottom, they found that organizations with mature value measurement practices had 3x higher return on investment on their technology investments. So lots of evidence as to why to have your act in order. So we've got some key takeaways here as we wrap up, some action plans for you. Really start with value, right? Focus on providing business value and impact, and really action on initiatives that are deemed relevant in your organization. What are you working on? How does that relate to your boss's agenda and how they're getting bonused this year? How does that agenda relate to your organization's business goals? There must be ties there. No one appreciates an EA science project better than us EAs, but no one outside of our special group really does appreciate those science projects. Everything we do has to be talked about in terms of how it provides business value and business impact. I would say really be seen to be seen. Don't let what you and your team provide to your organization be a mystery. Really measure your impact and communicate it loudly and often. Toot your own horn so people know that what you guys are providing proactively to the business, and always look for opportunities to optimize efficiencies. In some cases, with organizations I've worked with, we've suggested sort of a town hall, business problem town hall, or an EA town hall, where people can bring whatever and throw that spaghetti against the wall. But it created a dynamic between different teams that didn't exist before. In another organization, we printed out a big poster, a big framework of what that team was doing and stuck it on a few walls so people could start to look at it as they wandered around the office, and it started to become a place where people would gather and talk about it and point to things and, hey, how does that affect what I'm doing here, etc. So some of those little things can really make a big difference. Transformation isn't just about technology. It's really about communicating and about understanding. And you can't transform what you can't see. You can't modernize what you can't understand. And you can't lead if you're navigating in the dark. So communicate early and often. EA is really not an IT discipline. It's the language of the modern enterprise. It's a way to make sense of complexity so we can build something stronger, faster, and smarter. Sorry. When we tackle tech debt and application sprawl and AI readiness and M&A, et cetera, and you look at it through this EA lens, remarkable things can really start to happen. People stop being reactive and we start designing the future proactively. And the organizations in the end, the ones that win aren't going to be the ones with the most technology. They're going to be the ones with the clearest architecture. I firmly believe that. So before we wrap up, we like to keep promoting things in the industry, great people, great content, etc. So some industry content to pay attention to in January, February. So we've been involved in some events already. The first week of January, we participated in the Twin Cities Business Architecture Forum Summit, and that was in Minneapolis. Linda Finley runs that organization. It's great. If you just Google TCBAF, you'll find her. Highly recommended. Next week, we're going to be at the Business Transformation World Summit in Miami. And that's a great event. So we are sponsoring, QualiWare is sponsoring, and I am moderating a panel discussion on measuring transformation success and what metrics work and how do we get buy-in and all that good stuff. I've got 3 fantastic panelists we're going to talk to. The Chief Architect Network, if you're not aware, you've got to be a chief architect to join, but it's a great community and we're proud to sponsor some of their efforts in the community. That's run by Grant Ecker. He's on LinkedIn, you can find him there and connect, or you can also Google the Chief Architect Network and you'll find some great information there. In terms of some content, Roger Burleton is a great partner of ours, and Roger runs a firm called the Process Renewal Group. He's well known in the business architecture world and business transformation world, and he and Wendy Keene are working on some content about business cohesion, and that really fits in well with QualiWare because we're all about the Danish management philosophy of cohesion. So look for some content coming out soon there, and we're going to work with Roger and Wendy, I believe, in promoting a webinar with them where they can talk about that research, that content. Some books that I've been reading lately is a great one. It's on the screen there, Business Architecture. It's about connecting the dots, and that's by Roger Burleton, who I just mentioned. And then also a newer book to me, which I'm in the middle of reading right now. So far, it's great, by Chris Lockhart, and that's called The People Problem. I don't know if you can see that there. And that's a fantastic read as well. It's a primer on architecting the enterprise as an EA. There's a couple of great podcasts that are happening these days. If you don't know about them, it's Consultants Saying Things with Oliver Cronk, Chris Lockhart, Wendy Keene, and Phil. And there's another great podcast called Architect Tomorrow. So I hope you guys find that content useful. The key takeaways really, it's transformation is the name of the game. AI is not going anywhere, and QualiWare is here to help you with all of that. So I appreciate you guys spending some time with me today. Please feel free to reach out directly or through the website, and we're happy to help you just either connect in the community or help you directly with some initiatives you're working on. Thank you so much.